Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. I'm Dave Lockren. With me, Adam Scher and the man, Alex Baker, Awesemo himself. All right, boys, it's good to be back. You enjoy the break?
Yeah, I mean, I was craving my DFS fix a little bit, but maybe like 3 days off of the whole year, that's not too bad. So it's pretty good. How about you guys?
I already asked Adam on Friday, so we don't need his answer. But I was more so speaking to you without using your name. We've got 10 games today. Let's just jump right into it. Adam, I'll ask you first. I didn't see anything big, but just to make sure we cover all our bases, any weather concerns, anything that wasn't the case earlier today that may have popped up as far as scratches, lineup changes? Go ahead.
No, as of last I saw, everything looks fine. Maybe a little bit of issues in St. Louis, but I think that's supposed to clear out and be okay as well. So looks like a pretty straightforward 10 games.
Cool. All right. Well, let's kick it off with Tampa Bay, New York Yankees. Adam, I'll stay here. Blake Snell, James Paxton, two guys, one of them is going to get a ton of ownership today. The other one should get some ownership just based on his price tag and the Yankees active roster actually not being that good against lefties. While whether you believe in that or not is what the stats have been this season, whether you believe it's going to continue. But let's start with Paxton here. Chalk of the day for the most part, his price is down. There was an interesting article on Fangraphs, though, that came out a couple days ago that I cited in today's deep dive, which is free, by the way, on awesemo.com, about the K rate being down since he came off the injured list and not throwing that wicked cutter as much. I don't know how much to buy into it. His last start looked a whole lot better, 17% swinging strike rate, and it is against the same Tampa Bay team he's facing today. So he's going to be popular, but obviously the ceiling doesn't really match up to that price point. Where do you stand on Paxton?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's popular for good reason. For one, his price tag is affordable really across the industry. The matchup against Tampa Bay isn't particularly bad. I mean, you look at the Tampa Bay lineup and they do have some power in there, but it's not the scariest lineup that you're going to get. And he is, a good strikeout pitcher. And on this slate, there's not a ton in the way of like clear-cut aces. Like we know Castillo's really good. We know Kershaw's good, but and so is Giolito. But they all have issues to some extent, whether it be matchup or other things. So getting that discount on Paxton, I think, is really appealing. I don't anticipate being like miles ahead of the field. Like if he does come in at 33 to 35% owned, like we have him right now, I expect that I'll be in that range or slightly ahead. But I don't think it's a spot that I'm like coming in underweight or fading.
Where are you at on this pitching matchup between Blake Snell and James Paxton, Alex?
Oh, I'm not crazy about Paxton. I think he's fairly priced on all three sites, so I'll probably end up with him a decent amount. The main factor against them is that the Rays offense strikes out 21.4%. That's about 7% less than your average team. On the year, Paxton's strikeout number is 29%, pretty good, but he's not a guy that goes super deep in games recently. And the price tag of 9,300, 9K, and 44. This is about where I think he should be.
So you're using strikeout rate versus lefties and righties, right? Total K rate?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure because I know earlier in the year they had a wicked K rate against lefties. I know some people only use it again or don't use it the splits with handedness in terms of strikeout rate. Adam, what about Blake Snell here? Any interest against the Yankees, who are obviously a dangerous team?
I think a lot will come down to the projected ownership on Snell for me because it is a dangerous matchup. You mentioned the Yankees numbers against lefties this year, but I don't buy into that being a thing that continues going forward. There's just no reason for it to. 1 through 7 in this lineup are all really good hitters. And then you get Urshela and Gardner, who they're not bad hitters. They're just not 1 through 7 in this order.
Really what you're hoping for is just that we know that Judge, Sanchez, and Torres are going to sustain high K rates. I mean, right. You're hoping the 4 guys in this lineup, I'll throw Hicks in there, that are going to strike out 25 or more % of the time, strike out a lot today. That's what you're hoping for.
Yeah, exactly. And if Snell were to be projected for low ownership, then it becomes appealing because even though it's a scary matchup, Snell does have the highest strikeout percentage on the slate. He is a really, really good pitcher. but it is a dangerous Yankees lineup. He has a negative park shift getting out of Tampa Bay, and his price tag, while I wouldn't say it's too expensive for his ceiling, it's not like you're really getting a Yankees discount on him either. So if he's going to come in around 15 to 20% owned, I expect I'll be underweight and just, look to some other guys. But if, his ownership were to drop into that 5 to 10% range, then I think he starts to become more appealing.
Highest K rate, highest swinging strike rate, and highest called plus swinging strike rate on the slate. So like you said, if the appeal's coming from anywhere, it's right there.
Yeah, it's talent, but it's also a brutal matchup.
It's a super dangerous matchup. Alex, what do you have to add on this Blake Snell matchup against the Yankees? And do you have interest in these Yankee righties running out 8 righties and then Brett Gardner at the 9 spot?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm more interested in Paxton. I have Paxton projected higher. Snell gets more strikeouts per batter, and he goes slightly deeper in games. He's a better overall pitcher, but it all boils down to this. The Rays have a team total of 4.3. The Yankees have a team total of 5.2. And, I mean, while that's low for the Yankees, that's high for a pitcher that's priced top dollar. I do like his price on Yahoo at 38. I think that's more
crazy.
It's kind of crazy, but I mean, with this matchup, that's kind of more in line with where I think it should be.
All right, that's fair enough. I mean, should he be 50? No, but I don't know. Anytime there's a guy that has 30% K rate, he's at least gonna create some intrigue. What about batters? Either side, Alex? Do you have? I mean, you got 2 lefties on the mound that Paxton has struggled with right-handed power this season, no question, and Snell recently has allowed at least a home run in 4 straight starts. So not a huge power problem for Snell, but he hasn't necessarily looked the same since returning from injury, and neither is Paxton, to be fair.
I gotta give some love to the Yankees, I guess, because it's a little bit site-specific. On FanDuel, they're very expensive, so that's appeared to be contrarian spot. But their team total of 5.2 is decent. The price tags on DraftKings and Yahoo are manageable. And it looks like the ownership is going to be super low. And the reason why I think this might be a better spot than projections indicate is because the disparity between the pitcher they're facing versus the bullpen is so high that if they manage to get him out of the game, the upside is a little bit higher compared to the projections than other teams.
Adam, hitters from this game, either side?
Yeah, some interest in the Yankees just because they're not going to project as the best stack because they're facing Snell, but they clearly have one of the deepest, most talented lineups of any team on the slate. And when you're talking about large field, top-heavy tournaments, I think there's a lot to be said for just getting to low-owned, really, really good offenses, and the Yankees are clearly one of them. But, individually, there's no one that I think's a great play because it is a tough matchup.
All right. Let's move it on then. That game had a lot to talk about. This next one has a decent amount too, Alex. Clayton Kershaw, Zach Eflin. We'll start with Kershaw first, then we can get into how Eflin's going to get the shit beat out of him by the Dodgers at Citizens Bank Park today. But let's start with Kershaw. He just hasn't been a supremely high upside pitcher this year, while the Phillies have definitely struggled. They've been, as underwhelming as it comes given their roster, or at least their hitters. They're still a pretty low strikeout, high walk team against lefties. What do you make of the pitching matchup for Kershaw in a park downgrade?
I'm kind of interested in how the price tags are so high on Kershaw today.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's like they're pricing him like he's Clayton Kershaw, and he isn't that good a pitcher anymore. Only 23% strikeouts on the year. That's just league average. So he's a great pitcher, above average, not elite anymore, but he's not a great strikeout pitcher, and that's really what you need to warrant a 10K plus price tag on fantasy.
Adam, do you agree with that?
Yeah, this slate, I think he's a little bit more appealing for me than he is on most slates, just because there's not a clear-cut guy that I really, really love. But that being said, I'm still probably going to get around 10% on DraftKings because it's not a great strikeout matchup against Philadelphia. It's not a great park. And like Alex said, he's got a 23% strikeout percentage. You can get the same strikeout percentage from Max Fried for $3,500 less on DraftKings. In not a good matchup, but just from an upside standpoint, Kershaw's really good at preventing runs, but that only gets you so far in DFS, and you're paying for the strikeouts there. So I don't anticipate getting tons of Kershaw.
Yeah, neither do I. I do, however, Adam, anticipate having a lot of love for this Dodgers team. Look, Eflin's giving up more than 2.25 home runs per 9 to left-handed hitting this year. You've got Jock Peterson, Alex Verdugo, Bellinger, Max Muncy. You got Seager back in the lineup. I mean, what a brutal gauntlet of hitters he's going to have to go through today in near 90-degree temperatures in one of the most homer-friendly parks.
Yeah, no question. I'm hoping I get to a lot of Dodgers here. I think that it's a really good spot. You know, the park plays up home runs, like you said. It's hot and humid, I'm assuming, in Philly because it's pretty nasty here in Baltimore.
The humidity hasn't been terrible, but it's definitely – I just took the dog for a walk and almost died.
Yeah. Yeah, I walked out to my car for something and immediately started sweating.
Did you get sunburn?
Yeah. No, I mean, I wore a hoodie and jeans. But no, I mean, Eflin doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. He gives up a ton of power to lefties. You know, he's good against righties, but the only righties in this lineup are Justin Turner batting third and then Kike and Barnes down at the bottom. You get some really good lefties with Peterson, Verdugo, Bellinger, Muncy, and Seager. So a pretty deep lineup, a lot of power, affordable price tags on everyone. I really like the Dodgers.
Yeah, Alex, are you on the same page as us? And by the way, you look on DraftKings, they are not overpriced even remotely. So that definitely adds to the appeal. What are your thoughts on the Dodger bats and hitters all around here, Alex?
Man, I think Jock Peterson is just an amazing value on all three sites. Like, especially on Yahoo where he's $10. Like, this is a guy who's just in the home run derby. So that's, I mean, I guess maybe.
Is that your standard now? If you're in the home run derby, you should be 5K.
maybe I'm not adjusting for the post home run derby slump because, you know, it really messes up their form. But I really like his spot today. And on DraftKings, just every batter is above 2 points per dollar aside from Corey Seager, who's just at 2 on FanDuel. Seeing a lot of above average values, and on DraftKings, Jock is just super underpriced, and Austin Barnes is $7, which is really good for a team with a 5.7 total. So I think, if anything, I mean they're a top stack, but they might be a little bit too high on to really be one of my top stacks.
All right, Adam, do you have any interest in the other side against Kershaw?
Not really. It feels kind of unnecessary on this slate. I mean, if you're playing 150 lineups and you get a Philly stack or two, it's whatever. It's a good park. But you're talking about a slate that has 10 games, a slate that has Coors, and then a ton of other, you know, really good offenses, whether it be the Dodgers, the Red Sox, the Indians in a favorable spot. I think that you're going to get low enough ownership on a lot of really good stacks that you probably don't need to have too many stacks against Clayton Kershaw.
All right. Makes sense. Let's talk about Boston and Toronto, Alex. Trent Thornton, Rick Porcello. Porcello going to garner some ownership just based on his salary. I mean, there's nothing really redeeming about him outside of, you know, he's been below average pretty much everywhere, but he's a big favorite. And Toronto's not the greatest teams, particularly against righties. Like, they have some power, but I mean, they struggle to get on base. They will strike out. One of the lowest WRC pluses in the league. But you also have a few cheap options here. One of them above him by like 900 and Jake Junis. And then you've got Musgrove below him and maybe one or two others that we can talk about. Let's start with Rick Porcello.
Yeah, I think the conditions here are very favorable for batters. So we're seeing this team, or the over-under of 11, which is just insane. But Fenway in July, I guess I'll do it. And Toronto, as you mentioned, not the most formidable lineup, but just about league average with what they're rolling out. A little bit above average in power. So it's not a good spot for Porcello by any means with facing an average team and being in adverse conditions for pitching. But the price tag on DraftKings is really low. On FanDuel and Yahoo, he's a little bit harder to get to. So I think I wouldn't blame anyone who has 6.3K left and they clicked his name.
What are you doing with him, Adam?
That's pretty much where I'm at. As little Porcello as I can get, I'm happy with, but I just have kind of accepted that he's going to be in some lineups because he's 6.3 on DraftKings, and Toronto does give you some strikeouts. I do think it's a scary spot for him, and I do have interest in going to some Toronto bats because Porcello is just not a high strikeout pitcher. He gives up power to both sides of the plate. The only reason he's getting ownership is because of the price tag. There's nothing really redeeming about Rick Porcello at this point. And whenever you're going to get a pitcher like that that's owned by 20, 25% of the field, you get a pretty nice leg up if you can grab a couple home runs against him. So he's a guy that fills out some lineups for me where I have a less popular stack or less popular one-offs or whatever it is, because I think he's a perfectly fine point per dollar play. But I think that his floor is basically non-existent.
I feel like at this stage of the game, every matchup is a tough matchup for Rick Porcello. But I understand rostering him, though. I mentioned him in today's deep dive just because he is cheap and there's a good chance he gets the win. And I don't think he needs to have a monster game here. But at the same time, it's still Rick Porcello. And there are some alternatives here. Adam, what about the Boston Red? Unless you want to speak on Trent Thornton, I don't imagine you have a ton to say there. What are your thoughts on the Boston hitters here with a 6+ total?
Yeah, definitely interested in Boston here. I think it's worth mentioning that Thornton has been really, really good against right-handed hitters in particular this year. Yeah. But when you talk about guys like Mookie Betts and JD Martinez, especially at discounted prices, I don't really care what the opposing pitchers' numbers are in that split, especially when it's not like they're an elite pitcher overall. And then you still have talented lefties with Devers, Benintendi, Bradley can do plenty of damage. There's still 5 total lefties in this lineup, so it's a really dangerous spot still. It's a really high upside stack for the Red Sox. I expect that they may become in a little bit under-owned because you have relatively cheap pricing in Coors Field today. You have cheap pricing on the Dodgers like we talked about, but then here on the Red Sox you have a $5,300 Bogarts and a $5,500 Devers. Everyone else is pretty cheap, but maybe they come in a little bit lower owned than they otherwise would.
Do you like Boston here as much, Alex?
Yeah, I think they have to be one of the first teams that you consider today with that huge team total, facing a pitcher who's just kind of average, maybe a little bit below average, and the price tags aren't that high. On Yahoo, they're a little bit higher than on FanDuel and DraftKings, but DraftKings in particular has several players that are really underpriced, with Betts and Martinez. Who would have guessed, right? And then Sandy Leon at 2.2K, like a terrible player, but you need a catcher in every lineup, so I could definitely see myself ending up with him.
Okay. Adam mentioned some Boston or Toronto bats. Do you have any love for these Toronto hitters, Alex?
I think if I was going to pick Toronto today, it would be because I'm expecting high ownership on Porcello. That's only the case on DraftKings, so I could see myself ending up with Toronto and DraftKings, but I don't see much reason to go there on FanDuel and Yahoo because Porcello isn't high owned.
Yeah, Toronto ownership is coming in at 2.3% on DraftKings right now, according to our Awesemo top stack tool, which Alex developed himself. So higher top stack probability than ownership. Not a huge surprise there. Porcello is not very good. Let's keep moving to Cleveland and Detroit. Adam Plutko and Daniel Norris. Okay, one thing to talk about here is a little bit surprising that Cleveland's ownership appears to be very low on DraftKings and on Yahoo. Granted, you can factor some of the pricing in there, but they're not that. Some of them are pricey, but not all of them are that expensive, especially not where they were a few weeks ago. Top stack probability is 8.2% on the Indians, which is the third highest and the highest outside of Coors Field. Ownership only 5.2%. You've got to come all the way down to 8th or 9th to get there. What do you make of these Indian bats at home against Norris?
In general, I kind of hate rostering the Indians, but I'm getting there today just because Norris is, a pretty mediocre pitcher. The bullpen behind him is not any good either, so there's tons of blow-up potential for Cleveland. It's a park where, for whatever reason, Cleveland has just hit better at home for like ever. So that certainly doesn't hurt either. It's not something I weigh in much, but it's at least worth noting. But if they are going to get lower owned or be relatively low owned, then I like getting there. I think Lindor is a top shortstop option, but he probably won't get that much ownership because Trevor Story plays the same position. You get, some power with Luplow, Ramirez, Mercado is hitting second. So it's just kind of a lineup that isn't that appealing if you just go player by player, but they are clearly in a high upside spot against this Detroit team. So I think that does keep ownership down a bit.
Do you like them, Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ownership's the main factor here. It's like a couple of years ago, if you saw a team with a 6.3 team total, they would be like the chalk of the chalk. But today they're the fourth highest on the slate, and the price tags are all very affordable on every site. And I would expect with that being the case, the ownership would be sky high, but it's not. So I really like going there.
All right. Any pitching for either of you? I know a lot of times we'll talk about Adam. A lot of times we'll talk about like, oh, a 4K pitcher is viable. The thing is, I don't know if you even need to get to a 4K pitcher today. Even Coors isn't that expensive.
Right. I mean, I'm getting like a little bit, but it's not a lot. I had Norris actually capped around in my crunches around like 25%, and he was still only ending up in around like 8% because, like you said, he's just really not necessary on this slate. So I'm expecting to have him kind of sprinkled in just because of the price tag, but certainly not someone I'm seeking out and targeting.
What about you, Alex?
I think he's playable just because of the price tag. And if the Indians were super chalky, I would like it more. But given that they're kind of in the middle of the pack with ownership, there are a couple guys I prefer a little bit more than Norris.
Yeah, that was kind of the thing for me too. It's the Indians. I don't know. I thought they'd be a little bit more popular, but they aren't. Maybe it's because do we still have just to look here? Do we still have Norris at double-digit ownership on DraftKings?
Yeah, he's at 14% in our latest.
So he's actually come up from earlier. Yeah, maybe that has something to do with it. Detroit hitters, Alex. You have Adam Plutko on the mound for Cleveland. He's been very pedestrian, and I think that's what all of us would have expected from him. Do you have any interest in him or the Tiger hitters today?
I think they're on the fringe of being playable on each side, just kind of priced fairly. There are a couple of guys that are jumping out, like Harold Castro batting second. He's $7 on Yahoo. But with the lack of great options at high-end pitching, I don't really see much advantage to spending down on bats today.
All right, Adam, what about this side for you? Any interest or mostly just Cleveland hitters?
Yeah, mostly just Cleveland hitters. I agree with what Alex just said about like if you're spending down on hitters today, you really just need like everything to go right. Like you need the pitchers that you're paying up for no real reason to have a much better game than the mid-range guys. You need the Tigers bats to be like a top scoring offense on the slate. Like I think Kristen Stewart's a good play because Plutko is absolutely awful against left-handed hitters, and Stewart's the only reasonably good left-handed hitter in the lineup, but he's just kind of unnecessary on this slate too.
All right. We've got some wind at Wrigley, boys. Except the matchup really doesn't do us a whole lot of justice. Last I looked, here we go, 15-mile-per-hour winds blowing out the center field. It's going to be hot there. Going to be a little bit sticky. Alex, Luis Castillo, Kyle Hendricks, both of whom in their own way have been very effective this year. Is this a game where you say, or actually, let me just ask you this as a blanket statement. Is this a game you're looking at? And if so, where?
So I think it's site specific. On FanDuel, the teams are much higher priced relatively to Yahoo and DraftKings. The Reds in particular on DraftKings are totally underpriced. The whole lineup on Yahoo, they're a little bit more. And then the Cubs are super cheap on both Yahoo and DraftKings. So I think they're really high projection plays for the salary, but the ownership is going to be high as well. So that might throw me off their scent a little bit because, as you mentioned, these are two good pitchers. The over-under of 10 on a normal night would be rather impressive, but these teams aren't in the top 5 as far as team totals tonight. So I think given that so much ownership is congregating to these teams, I think that you can look elsewhere for your top stacks. But one exception, I think, maybe on FanDuel, where actually the ownership's still pretty high, even though the value isn't that great. So yeah, I'm not super high in this game.
Yeah, I was, and I'll go to you, Adam. I was a little bit. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. People, you know, people get excited over the wind, and you got if you're just looking at the top stack tool. I'm not saying it's the end all and be all, but Chicago right now on DraftKings with more ownership than their top stack probability. Cincinnati with way more ownership, like the biggest margin of any team going today in that regard. More ownership on FanDuel. And look, I'm not saying they're super high on on FanDuel, only 4.8%, but still not a great ratio there. The same with Yahoo. What do you make of this game?
I I don't feel confident in it, but I do think that it's got a really high ceiling just because of the weather. A lot in this game will come down to the final projected ownership for me. I think one thing that is worth pointing out is that while the teams as a whole might get a lot of ownership, I think it's kind of skewed by some players like Kyle Schwarber, Jesse Winker, at the top being really highly projected guys. The Reds, I think, are pretty much throughout the lineup have a lot of ownership, but the Cubs, like Javi Baez projected for less than 10% ownership on DraftKings. I think all the Cubs except for Schwarber maybe are projected for less than 10%. Bryant's at 11 also, but just not a ton of ownership on like every player. So I am actually right now getting a pretty decent amount of Cub stacks just for the upside and the fact that if you full stack them, you'll probably be somewhat contrarian. But the Reds, I think, are a team that's really going to pop up in optimizers. And so I'm less inclined to get there. But on both sides, it's just like I'm not really confident. I don't think it's a high probability play because I think Castillo is really good. I think Hendricks is good, and the Reds aren't very good. But, with it being a 10-game slate and ownership really heavily going to Coors Field, I am interested in getting some of the power bets here.
All right. Alex, do you want to add anything to this game? Because – again, I think you pretty much hit on everything, but it is one of these wind games that gets a lot of attention. And even though you have two really good pitchers on the mound, we're seeing the totals climb up above 5, at least for the Chicago Cubs.
Yeah, I think Adam made a good point about Schwarber being kind of skewing the ownership numbers a little bit. So there are ways you could go about making a lineup with batters in this game that might be sneaky. And starting by fading like the higher owned players could be a good strategy. Okay.
We're through 5, fellas, halfway there. Milwaukee and Atlanta. Adam, Max Fried, Adrian Hauser, who has been markedly better against righties than lefties this year. We can get into that. And then you have Max Fried, who, with as far as ownership is concerned, is also getting a little bit of it, 13% on DraftKings, which is 13% more than I'm looking to get. But maybe you can change my mind. On Yahoo, nothing on FanDuel. On Yahoo, he's getting around 7. But you got pretty high totals for the Atlanta Braves. Last I looked, it was above 5. Nothing crazy, but decent. Let's talk about this matchup because, like I said, Hauser has been a lot better against righties than he has against lefties. And you're generally not going to get a lot of lefties, or at least not a lot of great lefties in the lineup outside of Freeman and once in a while Markakis or Albies. Anything you like in this game specifically?
I'm getting a lot of Max Fried. I just think that on a slate where there's not a ton of top-tier pitching that I am in love with, Fried comes in with a reasonable 23.2% strikeout percentage. He has a 6.5% walk percentage, which is respectable. 3.37 xFIP. He has been really good this year at limiting barrels on balls in play. Against righties and lefties, he's done a good job of limiting power. He's got a 128 expected ISO against righties, 0.090 expected ISO against lefties, and it's not a great matchup. I mean, there are some right-handed power bats in this lineup. And obviously, Yelich and Moustakas, but I just think at his price tag, you're getting more upside than downside on a slate where there's not really anyone jumping off the page.
All right. Does anything jump off the page to you, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, it's super, super hot in the Midwest today. It's supposed to be 88 degrees at first pitch in Milwaukee, and Milwaukee is a batter's park. So, I mean, I'm honestly surprised that the over-under in this game is only 10. That just shows like how good Max Fried and Adrian Hauser are, even though they're not exactly household names. I think the potential in this game maybe as high as the Cubs game, even, but the prices are a little bit higher too. So for that reason, I think it's kind of under the radar, especially the Braves being on the road with that 5.5 team total. If they go off, you get the extra inning, so that's nice. And I think they are fairly priced, so that could be a nice. You have to be contrary in a spot where everyone else is going to the Coors or the Cubs or whatnot.
Okay.
I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I agree with you that Max Fried isn't really that appealing because the conditions. He's a good pitcher, but the Milwaukee Brewers lineup's pretty good. I'd be more interested in Hauser, but only on DraftKings where you need the salary relief at 5,300. And I like his projected ownership because we have him at 4% in our latest update, and having that $5,300 pitcher that is fairly priced is pretty valuable.
Forgive me if you mentioned it already, but do we have any word on what the roof looks like at Miller Park tonight?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I didn't think of that.
So I don't know. I know there's a Miller Park hotline where you can call the number and see if the roof's open or not. But,
yeah, if I remember right, this is the one where they have a website that says roof status, and then it doesn't actually tell you the roof status.
All right, so here's what I'll do while we do. I'm going to call it and put it on speakerphone.
I like the entertainment value of this.
Yeah, why not? Let's see if it actually works.
I like how you just have it on speed dial.
No, I just
Calling the Miller Park Roof Hotline. Today is Monday, July 15th, and the Milwaukee Brewers will play host to the Atlanta Braves at 7:10 p.m. at Miller Park. The current weather forecast is calling for 88 degrees and sunny at game time, and the roof will be open for tonight's game.
There you have it.
To
Look at that.
Tickets or have any other questions, please press 1.
Thanks, pal.
You just saved us all on our phone bills, man. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. The roof will be open. 88 degrees and sunny, fellas. There you have it. All right. Well, I mean, that makes a big difference when you're talking about these warm temperatures, Alex.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed it out because I would have looked kind of like an idiot if it was close.
You got lucky, right?
Yeah.
At least it wasn't Tropicana Field you were talking about. All right. Let's keep it going then. KC and the White Sox. I'll go to you, Adam. Lucas Giolito, Jake Junis. This is kind of an interesting pitching matchup. The White Sox just overtook the Padres for the highest K rate in the league versus righties, so that's worth something, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so Junis, I think, will get a lot of ownership tonight. I think it's fine. Again, there's just not really clear-cut great pitching on this slate, and it is a White Sox team that strikes out a lot. That being said, though, Junis isn't a great strikeout pitcher. He does really struggle with home runs. You have power in this lineup, particularly Yohan Moncada, Jose Abreu, and Eloy Jimenez. I think those are three guys that you could look to for leverage on sites where Junis is popular. They are extremely expensive on Yahoo. Moncada's 24, Abreu's 19, and Jimenez is 21. But they're more reasonably priced on some other sites that you could, on DraftKings, in particular, where Junis will have ownership. Moncada is still expensive, but you have Jimenez at 4K. You have Abreu at 4,300. So I'm going to get to Junis, but kind of like every pitcher on this slate, it's not with a whole lot of confidence.
What about you, Alex?
I don't love Junis tonight. I mean, the ownership's high, especially on FanDuel and Yahoo compared to where it should be. So the matchup, I feel like the White Sox don't really deserve the reputation of being so easy for Ks because, for example, the lineup they're rolling out today, the average strikeout rate is 24%. League average is only 23%, so that's not really moving the needle much. This isn't the guy who gets a lot of strikeouts. And let me make sure this is right. The White Sox have a team total of 5.1, which is relatively high. So I think that if Junis is popular, rostering the White Sox as the leverage stack can make a lot of sense.
Okay. Yeah, I think Junis is just kind of one of those guys that's there if you need him. And the problem is it seems like a lot of people are needing him today because he's going to be relatively popular, right? 18% on DraftKings. Even on FanDuel on a one-pitcher site, you're looking at 22%, Adam. And then on Yahoo, 27%. at $33, much of this simply being because people want to play Coors Field.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Jake and I talked about it this morning too. There's nothing really appealing about Junis as a pitcher. And the point I made kind of was that, like, if you go back and look at his games, it's not looking at game logs to say, like, oh, this is what he, it's all that he's capable of doing. But if you just go back, like, over his last 10 starts, he doesn't have a single game where at $7,500 you, like, had to have Jake Junis.
Okay. Alex, hitters in this one against either Junis or Giolito?
Well, I just want to mention Giolito because we got a question in chat.
Sure.
He's the easiest play on FanDuel, I suppose, at 9,100. This is a guy whose xFIP on the year is 3.9. His ERA is 3.1, so he's been getting a little lucky. The strikeout's 30%. That's nothing to sneeze at, but the Royals strike out a little bit less than average. And their team total is 4.4, which is a lot higher than you want when you're paying $11K or $52 on a pitcher. And I think he might be FanDuel only with that in mind for me. And then I think the Royals are really well priced on DraftKings and Yahoo. On FanDuel, there might not be much reason to get to them, but they don't have a lot of potential tonight with the 4.4 team total. And Giolito's not popular, so I don't really see myself having a lot of them.
Do you see any need to get to hitters in this game, Adam?
No, not unless you're taking like a Jimenez or a Abreu or something where they're reasonably priced.
Okay. Keep it rolling. St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Alex, Miles Michaelis, Joe Musgrove. Musgrove seems like he's been chalk every start this season on DraftKings because they refuse to price him, or very, very seldom do you see him priced above or at or above 6K. That's the case again today. 5,800 against a Cardinals team that, man, against right-handed pitching, this team has actually been really bad this season. They are bottom 3 in WOBA, ISO, and WRC+. They got a top 10 K rate, granted, just against righties. But it's been a pretty disappointing season for a lot of the right-handed hitters on this Cardinals team. Talk to me about Musgrove. Is this a price, even at high ownership, that you're willing to bite on?
So breaking down the matchup, the Cardinals lineup today strikes out a lot. The only guy who's really below average strikeouts is Colton Wong. Everyone is kind of close to average or above it. Other than that, especially Tyler O'Neill, super high strikeout guy. So I can see like why you'd end up on Musgrove, but at 46% ownership, I'd rather take the opposing stack, to be honest, because I have this guy projected for 12.7 points on DraftKings. So that means half the time he's going to have less than 12 points, and you're not going to win any GPPs with that.
What about you, Adam? Obviously, this is one of those games where Musgrove is getting a lot of attention because he's really cheap. He has been all over the map this season. There's no disputing that. But he's also come through in the clutch in a lot of spots as well. So, it's never crazy to think that Musgrove can produce solid numbers against a team that's running out one, two, three, I think five righties. Could be better, but five righties. You have the pitcher in there, and your lefties outside of Carpenter, Fowler, Wong, and Matt Wieters. Not exactly a murderer's row of hitters there.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty favorable spot for him. The weather here is not bad for pitching either, but I'd mentioned it before that they talked about it on the Pittsburgh broadcast a couple starts ago, that early this season he was really having trouble still after having off-season surgery on his hip, and we've seen his velocity trend up. It was down his last start. He averaged 92.5 miles an hour on his fastball after being at 93.5 for the 2 previous starts. But if you go back and look at the course of the entire season, his first 4 or 5 starts, he wasn't even cracking 91 miles an hour. And then now he's, between 92.5 and 93.5 pretty much every start. We've seen more good starts out of him, not surprisingly, as that velocity's come up. And then with this Cardinals lineup, he does have a healthy 23% strikeout percentage against righties this year. The middle of the order with the Young, Goldschmidt, and O'Neill are all right-handed. Harrison Bader gives you some strikeouts down at the bottom, and then of course you have the pitcher and Michaelis. And then the lefties in this lineup just aren't really that scary outside of Matt Carpenter. Fowler, Wong, and Wieters all average to below average hitters. So I think that he's cheaper than he really should be. Him jumping to 46% projected ownership on DraftKings certainly gives me a little bit of a pause. Like Alex said, it starts to get to a point where you can kind of eliminate half the field if you are on the right side of stacking against him. But I do think that he's the top SP2.
Yeah, so do I. Do you have any thoughts on bats in this game? It seems like a pretty underwhelming one for hitting.
Yeah, not really that interested in hitting unless it's a leverage stack against Musgrove.
Alex, do you have any bats in this game?
Yeah, I think that the Cardinals stack with the leverage is pretty big, especially in smaller tournaments. They are reasonably priced with a few notable great values like Matt Carpenter leading off, Lauer O'Neill at 2,400, batting cleanup on FanDuel at 8 on Yahoo. So I think, if Musgrove wasn't projected to be so popular, I probably wouldn't end up with him much. But because he is, I think you get an advantage that way.
Okay. Adam, do you want to add anything else to this game?
No.
Okay. Hey, if you haven't checked out awesemo.com, by the way, you should do it. And when you do, use the sign-up code Deeper Dive, all one word, to get 50% off your first month. Get access to the ownership projections we reference in every show, the player projections, the top stack tool that we've been talking about throughout today's show. Alex Baker, our man Awesemo himself, developed and uses all these tools every single day. You've got all of the articles from myself, from Adam, from Josh, from Ben Rasa, from Jake, and a whole lot more. The Fantasy Cruncher add-on, the lineup builder for anyone who isn't MMEing every contest, and daily fantasy content for baseball, football, basketball, hockey, golf, NASCAR, MMA, even WNBA, and some betting content as well. Oh, and by the way, we got a wealth of free, it's all free, seasonal fantasy football content too. And Alex, you're going to have something coming up pretty soon as well for that you'll be producing.
That's right. Yeah, we're going to have season-long projections. I've been working hard behind the scenes on them, and I'm a day or two away.
Cannot wait. So we'll let you know when they drop. And go dipping our feet into the seasonal pool, and hopefully you come check it out. But if you want to get access to the DFS content, use the promo code DEEPERDIVE, one word, get 50% off your first month. All right, 2 to go. San Francisco, Colorado, Chichi Gonzalez, Derek Rodriguez, Adam, a 7.7 implied total for Colorado. This isn't really a surprise at all, actually. And I think it's 5.4 for San Francisco. They beat the piss out of Herman Marquez today in the first game of a doubleheader. This, for anyone that wasn't paying attention earlier in the day, is your second game of a doubleheader. And last I looked, we still don't have lineups for either team. But Derek Rodriguez outside of Oracle Park, I don't envision things going well for him.
No, this is one of those games where you look at it and I really have no idea how the offenses fail. But at the same time, it's baseball and there's 18 other offenses on the slate. So if they're going to be projected for really high ownership, then you can still make a case for getting away from them. But just obviously a really, really good spot for both teams. Chichi Gonzalez is not a high strikeout guy, hasn't had success in the PCL at AAA this year. No reason to think he's going to have success, in Coors Field either. And then Derek Rodriguez has been a pretty mediocre pitcher ever since coming up for the Giants. And now, like you said, he has the worst park shift for any pitcher possible. So he is stretched out. He threw 77 pitches in his last start at AAA, but facing a Rockies team that is, pretty much at full strength here. Really, really high upside spot, and pricing on both sides isn't really that scary.
All right. Now, Alex, neither of these guys are great pitchers. Chichi Gonzalez he's limited home runs to lefties in his cup of coffee at the major league level. And San Francisco isn't a great team, but you got a 13 over-under in this game. Instead of asking you if you like it, because it's a silly question, how are you approaching it?
Well, here's the thing is, if you have the optimal lineup with stacks, you're probably going to have a double stack of these two teams. Mm-hmm. But that still only gets you to a projection of like 120 on Yahoo and DraftKings and 140 on FanDuel. So even with that, you need so many things to break your way. So I think with the high ownerships we're seeing, I might try to find some slower owned guys, especially because the value is so good. It's going to be drawing a lot of ownership away from teams like Cleveland, as we mentioned before. So I think that this might be a game I just avoid because it's too popular unless I can figure out some really nice contrarian plays to fit in with it.
What about the bottom of these orders? Any interest there if they're going to be projected for a lot lower ownership?
Well, the crazy thing is the ownership's not even projected to be that low. Like
Okay.
the lowest on DraftKings is 7% for the Giants and 9% for the Rockies. On FanDuel, we're looking there might be a couple of guys in the low single digits, but your line is going to be super chalky if you have a full stack of either of these teams.
All right, Adam, what about you? Obviously, Colorado bats, San Francisco bats, everything Alex just said, very popular. Any thoughts on differentiating here with other teams, or are you just loading out?
Probably just, I mean, the way my stuff looks right now, it's that I'll probably be below the field on the Rockies and maybe on the Giants, and just looking to other teams. It doesn't feel good. I don't think that it works out all that often, but I think that the best way to win with the current projected ownership, the easiest way to win a large field tournament is probably to be on one of these other really high upside offenses, be overweight on several of them, as opposed to trying to, if you're playing like a 30,000 person tournament, trying to beat 10,000 Rockies stacks or something.
Yeah, pretty much. Favorite bats from this game, assuming we get pretty normal lineups?
Blackman, Story, Arenado, Dahl, Belt.
Anything for San Francisco?
Yeah, I mean, Belt, Vote would be an obvious catcher option.
Okay. Let's get to the last game then. Angels, Houston. Adam, you got James opening. Framber Valdez is your long reliever. Griffin Canning. Just miserable matchups for both pitchers.
Yeah, really tough spots for both guys. Josh James shouldn't go deep into this game. I believe it's supposed to be Framber Valdez after him. But Houston's one of those stacks that I think I'll be pivoting to off of Coors Field. It's not a great matchup against Canning. I do have respect for Canning as a young pitcher. I think that he'll continue to develop into a good pitcher. But so far, he has struggled with power to both sides of the plate. And we know Houston has a lot of power in their lineup. They're also really cheap. So you can get good pitching with a Houston stack, getting to the guys that you want: Springer, Altuve, Bregman, Brantley, Alvarez. Like, it's not hard to stack Houston whatsoever. They probably won't have a whole lot of ownership on this slate. And the ballpark, we've talked about it a lot this year, isn't the pitcher's park that it used to be. So I think they're a team kind of up there with, the Dodgers, the Red Sox, the Indians, teams that I'd like to be overweight on at the expense of some of the Coors Field exposure.
Yeah, Alex, do you have – I can't imagine you have a ton of interest in either pitching matchup here. Obviously, one of these guys isn't even starting the game, but Houston and the Angels make for brutal matchups no matter who's on the mound.
Well, actually, I could see ending up on Framber Valdez. I have him projected a little bit higher than Daniel Norris, so maybe he's below average value. This is DraftKings only, of course, but I could see myself there. Not crazy about it, but it'd definitely be a way to differentiate. Well, I think on FanDuel, both batting on the batting side, both teams are a little bit overpriced. On Yahoo as well, with the exclusion of a couple guys. On DraftKings, you can make a pretty nice stack out of either team.
Okay. Who are your bats from this game that you're interested in?
Altuve at 3,800 on DraftKings and 12 on Yahoo. Upton is only 3,700 on DraftKings. Mike Trout, if he's in the lineup, I know he got pulled from the game yesterday, but you guys might have heard of him. He's not too bad. So yeah.
Okay, Adam, bats.
Yeah, Bregman, Altuve, the Houston 1 through 5 really stands out because of the power that Canning gives up. On the other side, I would kind of be surprised if we get an Angels lineup much before lock because of Trout. If we don't have one, I'm going to assume that Trout is out, and that obviously makes them less appealing. But if we get confirmation that Trout's in, then he obviously is a great play. Justin Upton's really cheap, but the Houston side is where I'm most interested.
Man, 10 games, 552. What happened
with a phone
here?
call in the middle too.
What'd you say?
I said with a phone call in the middle too.
That's right. Yeah. Does that tell you anything about this slate, Adam? Like, is this just more? I don't want to say more clear cut than we should be. It's Colorado, it's Coors, and this is I'm talking about where the fields go. What looks good, not necessarily what's going to be good, but Musgrove, Coors, Paxton. It feels kind of clear cut on the surface, but there's a lot of ways to get away from that.
Yeah, I think that it's a slate where there's very clear like point per dollar plays that stand out above the rest, and that makes it kind of a quick slate to talk about. But it's also an interesting one for tournaments because where a lot of that ownership's going to go, and as you just have to be able to stomach not being there, even though it's going to project as the best spots to be at.
Yeah, for sure. Top stacks, fellas. We've got 20 teams going today. I'll throw obviously Coors, but I'll throw it out there and then go to you, Adam. Really like the way this Dodgers lineup is constructed against Zach Eflin today.
Yeah, I really like the Red Sox. I really like Houston.
Alex?
I'll give some love to the Indians. They have low ownership compared to that 6.4 team total, as we mentioned. And then people were asking in chat about my anti-optimizer stack of the night.
AOS.
So yeah, I gotta go with the Braves. I mean, Adrian Hauser is not a bad pitcher by any means, but they still have a team total of 5.5 because the weather is so good there. And the ownership is rock bottom. I mean, I have them projected as the 7th highest top stack percentage, and they are 15th in ownership. So that's a big gap that I'm planning to exploit.
I was a little bit surprised to see that the Dodgers ownership projection is way higher than the top stack probability, 8.9 and 5.9 respectively. What do you make of that, Alex? Do you think, I'm looking, or I see this as too good of a matchup than it really is for the Dodgers?
I'm going to need to update this because apparently my most recent numbers haven't come in. But all right, so the ownership has gone down a little bit since the latest update, but it's still among the higher ones. But the biggest difference I noticed is that San Francisco's ownership is super high now, 16% on DraftKings compared to 8.8% on our last update.
Wow.
So, I think we might have to refresh this and then start over, given the huge discrepancy.
I mean, that's a huge discrepancy there. What does it tell you? Like, what do you make any adjustments based on that, or you were already going to be pretty low, I would imagine, on the Giants bats from the way that you spoke about them earlier?
Yeah, I was going off the number in my cheat sheet, which I guess I hadn't uploaded the newest version, which I just did. But so that's where my analysis was coming from. On FanDuel especially, the Giants are projected to have 1/5 of all the ownership, which is a statement on its face that you got to be like, what the heck is going on? Because this is like one of the worst teams, right?
Coors will do that. So will Wrigley Wind. Can you tell us if the Wrigley ownership came down at all?
Yeah, let me take a look. No, it went up actually.
Wow.
Chicago went up considerably. And they're playing Cincinnati, who they are now the 3rd and 4th highest owned teams on DraftKings, on Yahoo, also on FanDuel, 4th and 5th.
All right. Yeah, Adam. Meanwhile, the lowest teams ownership wise are Pittsburgh and Philly and the Angels and the Cardinals and the White Sox, Tampa, Toronto, all of them under 2%. Since we do have a couple minutes here, is there anyone that stands out to you there, or are they really low for a reason?
I mean, I think for the most part, they're really low for a reason. St. Louis is the one that stands out, though, just because they're a really low probability of being the top stack, but you do get the added benefit, like we talked about, of if they are the top stack, then half the field just kind of lost.
All right. Alex, anything to add before we close this one out? Hand it over to the Live Before Lock crew.
Yeah, just if you're watching this, make sure to enter a bunch of lineups with Joe Musgrove with the full Coors stack, because that's not what I want to be doing. And hopefully that doesn't work out.
All right. Sounds good. Great advice.
Well, then you're always supposed to tout the side against the one that you want
Right,
to go off.
That's
right?
pretty much the cash lineup tonight. It
Yeah.
has to be.
I don't see how it couldn't be.
Yeah.
With Paxton, of course.
Right. Yeah. Paxton, Musgrove, and then every bat from Coors.
Yep, pretty much. I don't see any edge in cash tonight. I mean, I guess there could be, but I don't know.
I mean, they won't be 100% owned.
What?
They won't be 100% owned at lower. There's an edge in lower stakes cash tonight for sure. Higher stakes, you're kind of just swapping one versus ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Cash is all about who you're playing. If you want more information on that, you can check some of our game plan series. But if you're playing someone that doesn't know what they're doing, this is the most amazing night in the world to play cash, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no question. And you can get it in high stakes. It's just a lot less frequent these days.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us. It's good to be back. The three will be here tomorrow as well and on Wednesday. Then Alex will take off from the show until next Monday, and Adam and I will close it out on Thursday and Friday. Josh Ingham and Jake Harry coming up next, Live Before Lock, Monday night, 10-gamer. Enjoy it. Stick around on YouTube. But before you head out, hit us with a thumbs up if you like the show. Subscribe. Hit the notification bell. It helps us out a lot, and we greatly appreciate you hanging out with us today. Good luck. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the Deeper Dive.